Hi, everyone. Welcome to our third webinar in collaboration with Sesame Workshop. We are so happy to have you join us today. APA and Sesame Workshop have been collaborating with each other since 2020 on key issues related to children's mental health. This is the third series of webinars that we've done. Our first was on the complex issue of racial identity development in young children. Our second one was on fostering nurturing relationships between young children and their parents and caregivers. And then, of course, today's topic, helping young children navigate grief, is related to the new suite of resources that Sesame Workshop has recently launched. So we have a great presentation ready for you all today. We're excited. We see there's a very significant turnout, which makes us think that this topic is resonating with a lot of you. So without further ado, I'm going to toss to Tara Wright from Sesame Workshop and Lauren Summers from APA.
Great, thank you, Efwa. It's nice to see everyone. Let me share my screen really quick. All right. Okay, here we go. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Tara Wright. I'm a senior manager of content design here at Sesame Workshop, and my job is really to form and create the content that you see on sesameworkshop.org for mostly our social impact, US-based social impact programs. And I had the pleasure and the honor really of being the content lead for this latest iteration of our grief materials. And I'm so excited to talk to you about them today. And joining me today is Dr. Lauren Summers. And Lauren, thank you so much for being on the call as well.
Thank you, Tara. It's exciting to be here today. I'm Dr. Lauren Summers, the Deputy Chief of Psychology and the Public Interest at APA, where our mission is to move psychology to action by co-creating solutions and engaging in strategic alliances to address critical societal issues for positive global impact. And this webinar and this partnership with Sesame Street falls firmly within that. So we're so excited to be here today. And as a developmental psychologist, my focus is on addressing the needs of children and families. So again, it's a great fit. So thanks for being a part of this with us.
Great. And I'm going to look to you today to add a lot of context and insight into what grief looks and feels like for young children. And I'm excited about learning from you and learning some key points and adding some of our Sesame Workshop content and some of the printables and the different activities that can complement some of the key messages that you're going to share today. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Me too.
Great. Well, I want to begin with just a little history of our support, of Sesame Workshop support for families and young children who are grieving. And this is actually one of our oldest content topic areas. It began over a decade ago with our military work. So if you do work with military families, you can find even more resources for them at sesamestreetformilitaryfamilies.org. But way back in the day, we created a suite of resources for military families who were experiencing lots of deployments and homecomings and unfortunately losses as well. And we saw very quickly that there was a need within the general population to create resources to support families who have experienced the death of a close person. So we adapted some of those military resources for general population and created a storybook, a handful of videos. There was even a special with Katie Couric. And grief really continues to be one of our most visited topic pages on sesameworkshop.org, and it continues to be a valuable resource. But throughout the years, we've known that while, in that initial round of content, we were able to address the immediate after effects of a death of a close person. So we were able to help families really talk about what is death, what does it mean when a person dies, and what does that mean, especially to a young child? How do we talk about that? How do we communicate that in a way that they'll understand? So we were able to talk about death and help families learn some coping strategies and kind of adjust to new ways of life, and also to help remember the person who had died. That was sort of the core focus of our previous resources. And along the way, we've expanded on those resources, but we knew there was even more opportunity to create resources around the lifespan of that loss, and to help families grieve, because we know that grief is not a short and sweet situation. It's a long term, it's enduring, and it affects children as they grow up at different ages and stages, and it affects the whole family. So in this most recent iteration, which a new set of resources launched this fall and will launch tomorrow, I believe, with this new set of resources, we really wanted to talk about grief. So Dr. Summers, I want to turn to you and have you help us get some context on why we should talk about grief, especially with young children.
Sure, thanks, Tara. It's so important to think about the role that grief can play in a child's life, especially as they develop across different ages. And we got some questions about this through the registration process, so we really want to spend some time talking about it. And children do experience grief differently at different ages, and grief response looks different for children at different ages. Typically, we know that the closer the relationship between the child and the person lost, the more severe the reaction. Though that's not true for everyone, of course, but that's the typical experience that we see. So how does grief affect babies and toddlers? Although they don't understand the loss, and they may not understand loss, the idea of loss, they understand change, and they understand that something that they're used to may not be there anymore. So you may see behavioral changes in these very young children. Things like they may have changes in crying patterns or the amount of crying they do. They may be more irritable or more clingy or generally just more anxious, expressing more anxiety. You may see changes in eating, the foods that they eat or the amount that they eat. You may see changes in interest in play, or they may play differently. And you may see changes in their toileting or their ability to continue at the level of developmental stage that they have already achieved. During this time, for babies and toddlers, it's really important to give physical comfort and affection, to speak calmly with them, to assure them with their familiar comforts, things like a favorite stuffed animal or a blanket or things that are, a regular part of their environment. It's so important to maintain routines. Routine is very important for young children. It creates continuity and security. So that remains true even as you move into preschoolers, who are very literal once they reach that age of sort of preschool, the preschool range. And they may not understand that a death or a loss is permanent. They, know the person is missing, and they may ask questions about that person and when they'll be back or things like that. And they may not really understand that this is a permanent situation. Behaviorally, they may cry more. They may, as I mentioned, look for the person who died. They may express stress as confusion, and that may come out as more tantrums, withdrawal, showing some regressive behaviors like bedwetting or thumb sucking, having changes in their eating and sleeping patterns. So for children in this age range, again, it's really important to give physical comfort where you can, when you can, hugs, hand holding, touch that's reasonable. Keep them close with trusted adults, yourself or the parents or other family members. Read books together about grief, encourage creative play, value and share memories. So thinking about photo albums or memory boxes or things that you used to do with the loved one who's passed that you can share in a memory to help them process. Also cooking some favorite foods or doing other activities together that they used to do with a loved one. And that holds true for school-age children as well. They will understand that death is permanent a little better, and they're likely to ask some blunt questions that may be very difficult to answer. It may feel like difficult conversations to have, and they may be scared about their own lives. And that this may all come out as increased anxiety or higher distraction or attentional issues, some anger or guilt, other behavioral issues, things like blaming themselves, not wanting to go to school, repeated retelling of events that have happened or that happened with the loved one, and some somatic complaints like headache, stomachache, or exhaustion. All of those are kind of common grief response. And one thing to do to really reassure safety is to keep those routines that I mentioned before, encourage talking, and we're going to get to some more tips about and information about what to do with children who are grieving in a bit. But again, include them in ways to remember the person, some creative play and movement, things like that. So for all three age groups and for children as they're moving through the developmental phases, it's really important to be as concrete as possible when explaining death or loss. It's death is a complicated concept. So making it as clear as possible will help children to process both what has happened and their grief related to it. That was a big mouthful, Tara. Sorry.
No, that's
Sharing
so
some of-
good. And it's so good to hear you articulate all of these key points, because somewhere along the way in this new body of work, we've tried to address most of these concerns, whether that's in the language that we provide to parents and providers to talk about these things or help them know what to expect from their young children, or just in the activities to try to help them overcome. So talk about their feelings or ways to spend time together doing something comforting and reassuring. We've tried to address a lot of the things that you've just mentioned. So it's hard to hear, right? This is a difficult topic to address for families, but it's also reassuring to know that the content that we've made is really hitting these key points.
It really does.
And that's also in large part because with any of our initiatives, we really rely on research to form the foundation of any key messaging and any content that we create. So in this particular case, we talked with parents, caregivers, and who have experienced the death of a person in their family. And we've talked to experts in the field, and we did this through online discussion boards and small group interviews. And we really wanted to talk to these families about their real experiences of grief, especially that grief over time as their children grew. What types of challenges did they encounter, and what types of strategies helped them sort of overcome those challenges or take the next right steps. We learned a lot about some programs and some different strategies or information sources that really helped families. And we also talked with providers as well, what's really worked for the families that they work with. And of course, we wanted to gauge some responses to the ideas for this new content that we had. So we put together some concepts and we asked them, how do you feel about this? What would you change? How could you make this more effective and more helpful to families like yours? And through that, we got some recommendations, which are really in line with some of the things you just mentioned, Dr. Summers. So a few of these include, and there were more recommendations, but these are some highlights. And this really speaks to this first one, that grief is really complex. It's complex for children in the way that they share their grief, in the way that they express themselves. We heard a lot about these grief bursts, that children can really have these short-lived, very emotional responses, but they can be so short that by the time the caregiver is composed enough to respond, the child is already up and playing again. So we learned that children grieve differently than grown-ups, and that can help. When a grown-up knows that can help them prepare to respond in a more complete way, and to just take it easy on themselves as well, to know that their child is grieving in a unique way, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're grieving through their play, their routines, through their conversations with friends, all of those things. They're grieving as they grow. A second recommendation was to encourage parents to validate their children's emotions and to model grief for their children. So I know we're going to talk about modeling grieving later on in the conversation, but this was definitely a recommendation. And as you mentioned, just helping them be involved in decision-making and sort of building up that autonomy, because we know that when things change, children and grown-ups feel very shaky. So giving them opportunities to have some bits of control can really help. We also heard that it could help to prepare caregivers for those challenges that arise years after the death. So again, talking about re-grieving, honoring the person or celebrating the person at important milestones, and just being aware that those feelings of grief and the symptoms, those physical somatic symptoms, can come and go over the years as well. We heard that we needed to avoid language that is unclear. So just as you said, especially for very young children who are very literal, and we learned this when talking about death, right? We had to define it very concretely. We tried to avoid moving on or loss or things that were just unclear. So being very concrete, especially with young children. And then we learned that over time, when children ask questions, their questions are going to change over time as well. So that means the parents have to be prepared to respond in different ways and more nuanced ways as they grow. And finally, we did learn that, of course, caregivers need to practice self-care and really take care of themselves, and also just to allow themselves to find joy. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So with all these recommendations from research, we, of course, wanted to create some great resources for these families. But the first set of resources that I want to talk about kind of highlight the complexity of grief. And you touched on this, Dr. Summers, a minute ago, that it's very complex. But can you talk about some other factors that might be overlooked that can sort of add to the complexity of grief and how a family might experience it?
Absolutely, Tara, you're right. Grief is very complex. Grief related to the loss of loved ones is complicated by many accompanying other situations that are changing in the child's life. So things like maybe there's a need to move, or changes in schooling, changes in caregivers who might be spending the most of their time with them, changes in caregiving from another parent who's grieving, and also changes in the family financial situation. So really the full context, what car the child rides in most of the time. I mean, everything from sort of bigger picture things down to really the daily details can be additional changes, a host of factors that lead to the day-to-day of life becoming different than before the loss. And that can actually exacerbate the grief, adding some turmoil to the experience, and needs to be acknowledged also with the child, that these changes are coming along, and we understand that that may make it harder, and really giving space to process all of this in a more thorough way that deals with the complexity. We also see things like, children may experience disenfranchised grief, which is grief related to a loss that is less openly acknowledged or less publicly mourned, such as loss through a suicide or parental incarceration. So they may experience shame or have hurtful statements by others made toward them, and that can add confusion and negative emotions to the grieving experience. So, the best thing parents and caregivers can do is to acknowledge that and still try to support them through the grieving. And luckily, in this new suite of resources, Sesame Street has wonderful sort of a suite of approaches to help practitioners and families navigate these additional factors that add to the difficult experience the child may be having as they're going through grief.
Absolutely. And a couple of ways we've done that is through articles. So these are directed more for parents and caregivers or providers who are working with families. And in each one, we address some of the topics that you mentioned. So disenfranchised grief, the new family roles, so the compounding changes that can happen after someone dies. And also, just again, reiterating those milestones and how children grieve at different ages and stages and how to support them. I also want to mention, and I'll mention it later in the presentation, that we have a new provider guide that will be released that is more for educators or early childhood providers with a classroom setting, but that is a great resource where also we acknowledge that there can just be so many factors that are affecting how a young child is experiencing the death of the person, and perhaps affecting how they express their emotions around that loss, whether they feel like they can't grieve openly, or they feel ashamed somehow for this person's death. So that resource also acknowledges that every circumstance, every family, every child is different in how they relate to the person who has died and how they relate to their own emotions that they're feeling. So this is one set of resources, and there are others, and those themes sort of come up along the way, that that grief is just really nuanced for each person. Another thing you've mentioned, Dr. Summers, is talking about feelings and offering emotional support. And of course, that's sort of one of our bread and butter topics is emotional expression and self-expression here at Sesame. So we have quite a handful of resources that will help children and families talk more openly about their feelings and talk together about what they're experiencing. But and you mentioned some other ways to offer comfort, but do you have anything you'd like to add about offering comfort and emotional expression?
Really just the idea that children need to be reassured that their feelings are okay and that it can be helpful to express them, right? They need to know that. And the best way to do that is to listen carefully to the child's thoughts and feelings and then verbalize often that it's really okay to talk about sad feelings, and it's okay to feel bad about something or miss someone, and also feel happy about something else, because children can get, especially once around the school age, they can get very confused by I feel happy, but I feel sad, or I feel guilty about feeling happy. So it's really good to talk about that experience of you can be sad, or sadness can come back to you even after it's left, and you can be happy at the same time, and that's okay. And this is where the modeling comes in that's so important about don't hide your grief from your child. Set that example of healthy grieving, of talking about feelings and about the things that you're looking forward to, so that you're modeling that complexity of feeling. And I just want to say for, teachers and practitioners of all types and parents too, that, you may feel very unsure about starting a conversation or what to say if your child starts the conversation. You don't have to be perfect, right? It's okay not to have all the answers in everything in parenting, but starting the conversation with whatever way feels right for the child you're talking to, right? Individualized to them, or responding to the questions that they're asking you as openly and concretely as you can. And when you're going to start the conversation, ask open-ended questions and then listen actively for what they're saying, and responding to them in a normal kind of way. And I have to say, Tara, Sesame Street has articles with ideas about how to start these conversations that are excellent. So I really do recommend people looking into those. And then the last thing I'll say in this section is just to say, we really want to help children learn to express their big emotions, as Sesame Street refers to them, through all kinds of modalities. So talk, but some kids can't do that very easily. It's hard for them. They may want to express emotion through play, or through art, or through engagement in role play, or even reading. And there are a number of books, some very great ones by Sesame Street, that are helpful for starting these conversations or creating a space where children feel comfortable asking questions themselves. So those are just a few things that we can do to help support their emotional expression and offer them comfort as they're going through the process.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to talk about a few of the resources that can help start these conversations. So down at the bottom right of your screen, you'll see a screenshot of a game called Express Yourself with Elmo and Jessie. And I realize that you've been seeing Jessie throughout this presentation, but you may not know who she is. She's not necessarily one of our core characters. So let me explain who Jessie is. So Jessie is this blue Muppet girl. She's got blue body with her pink fluffy hair. And Jessie is actually Elmo's cousin. So way back in the day, through our first iteration of these grief materials, we were able to have not only Jessie and her mom, Jill, but also Elmo and his parents. So Elmo, Louie, and May helping explain death, right? So Louie's brother, Jack, died. And Elmo had big questions and big feelings. And we were able to see Louie and May talk to him about that, and see Jessie and Elmo experience and express their emotions together as well. So we've got this unique family dynamic going on. And so Jessie is sort of the Muppet who gets to help us model some of these behaviors, model for families what their child might experience as they grow. And in this suite of resources, we really did want to emphasize again that Jessie and her mom, Jill, they experienced the death of Jack a couple of years ago. So this is a few years out from the death. And so we're seeing through some of these resources, like in the storybook, Something New, it's really about those compounding changes and the changes that happen not only right after someone dies, but as you grow up and they're still not there for birthdays or for family meals, or as the seasons change. We'll see a clip later about how just the leaves changing can trigger some feelings of grief. So Jessie is sort of our star, and in this suite, we also wanted to highlight that the sweetness and the connection between Jessie and her mom, Jill. So they're really the stars of this suite of resources. But a little more about the game. So this Express Yourself with Elmo and Jessie is a game where we're using art, specifically clay, to help children express their emotions. So this game sort of pays tribute to the idea that also that grief doesn't go away necessarily, that it can stay with you, but that you can have a little bit of control over it. So the idea is that you make sort of a clay creature or a clay sculpture, and you can use stamps and scraping tools and things like that. You can change the color and you can put it on a background. So you can put your clay grief object in a specific place. And we wanted to hint at the fact that sometimes it's okay to dive into your feelings, your big feelings, and you want to get all that out. Maybe you do this digital game and then you take it offline and you have some modeling clay and you invite kids to really get in there with Play-Doh or something and all the tools and have that more tactile experience of expressing what their grief or their feelings just feel like, or what they want to do with them, if they want to smash them and smush them. This is a great way where you can take it offline into a real world activity. And then you can encourage them to put that away sometimes. It's okay to have these feelings, but we don't have to carry them around and be heavy. We can have the autonomy to pick them up and address them when we need to. I know that we do that as grown-ups a lot, and that's kind of one of the coping strategies that comes up pretty often when you're parenting as a grieving parent. That you take the time to deal with your own emotions and process your own grief, and then kind of put it away and keep going as more of a relationship with your grief rather than something that's weighing you down or consuming you. So that's a small nod to that, and it's a fun game also. And Jessie and Elmo offer encouragement along the way for children as they play. The new storybook is called Something New. It's a companion story to the previous book that was called Something Small. And it's about change and how you can learn and grow and celebrate the things that are changing, even when you feel sad. Then we have a few printables that are really playful and fun. One of them is a card. So if you are not a grieving child or family, but you know someone who is, you can offer some empathy that way. There's one where, again, you're invited to write down or draw some of the things that you've learned and ways that you've grown since your person has died. And then this last one is something that I think is really fun. This is a strategy that we heard from one of the experts we worked with along the way about really spotting and taking intentional time to notice things that make you smile and laugh. We heard that, as Dr. Summers, as you just said, it's okay to feel joy and to look forward to things, but it can be confusing. And especially right after a loss, families told us that it's hard. It feels like it's almost impossible to feel happy again, or that feeling hopeful just seems very out of reach. And one of the experts told us, it's so great when you can hone in your energy to find things that are bringing you joy, and make a list throughout the day, every day. Take this practice, and over time, the things that bring you joy or make you smile or laugh become closer and closer together, and you'll need the list less often, and it'll just become more of a habit, a habitual thing. And then before you know it, you're feeling more regulated and finding those joys in the everyday. So this is kind of like a scavenger hunt bingo type of game where kids can also tell you about things that made them laugh that day, and spark conversations from there. Okay, so we've mentioned that grief comes in waves, and pretty much in all of the resources that we created, that's sort of a theme along the way. But Dr. Summers, how would you suggest that we talk about grief over time with families?
I think in just exactly the way you said, Tara, that to explain that grieving takes time and that it does come in waves. And for little kids to explain it's like a wave. It may roll in, it may roll out, only to come again. So, we know that the most intense period of grieving is usually around the first 6 months following a loss. But grief, like you have said, is likely to continue for years. So it's common for children to revisit a lot of different emotions and reactions with things that happen, like the milestones you mentioned, anniversaries or death or other significant life experiences like a kindergarten graduation or a first recital or things like that. So I would say, whether it's a small thing like a certain scent or eating at a favorite restaurant of the person who's deceased that triggers some emotions, or something large like one of the milestones we just mentioned. Again, it's good to be very confident in conveying that it's okay and explain, how it makes you feel as well to have this experience and share that with the child. We had several people in the chat talk about storytelling and reflection activities, and those can really help in these instances. And then, of course, if grief reactions are debilitating or disruptive to the child's adjustment and their sort of ongoing daily activities, over time, that may be time to reach out for some professional support and look to psychologists or others in your community who might be able to help them with that adjustment.
That's absolutely right. Thank you so much. I'm so pleased with 3 new Muppet videos that we've created that all in their own way deal with re-grieving. In the first top left, you'll see Jesse and Jill. It also includes Elmo and Louie. And in this scenario, Jessie is playing with some blocks and she's getting really frustrated and overly frustrated. And the grown-ups notice and say, hey, what's going on here? And when it comes down to it, she's not really frustrated by the blocks, but she's frustrated by some other change that's happening, and she's feeling just as wobbly as the blocks are. And together they do a coping exercise that they learned together at grief camp. And they talk about their strengths, that even though things change, I am still me, and I am kind, I am generous, I am playful, all those things. So incorporating the strategy of giving yourself an affirmation, and really, again, highlighting that community aspect that these 2 families have come together and grieved together. In the top right, the family is celebrating Uncle Jack's would-be birthday. So Jack's birthday, and they do that by making his special Jack cakes, like pancakes. And they also have a family baseball game. And Jessie in this picture is wearing her dad's silly hat that he was famous for, and it's in all the pictures of Jack. So that one's showing different ways to celebrate the person who died and to remember them, and that it's okay to miss them too. And then in this last one, which I'm actually going to play for you, again, we wanted to highlight Jesse and Jill's relationship. And this is an example of Jill just really talking about it's okay to have feelings, and that she has big feelings too. So I'm going to go ahead and play this for us.
The leaves are falling. Did you see the leaves fall? Aren't they pretty? The colors? Mom, the leaves.
What?
Do you like them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Jessie, the leaves are beautiful. I was just... I was just thinking about your dad, and I'm feeling a little sad.
I don't want you to feel sad, Mom.
Oh, Jessie, I know you don't. But sometimes these feelings, they just come up. And when the leaves start to change colors like this, well, I start to think about your dad.
Yeah. I miss him.
Oh, I miss him too. Now, you know, your dad and I would sit right here on this very bench, and we'd hold hands and we'd watch the colorful leaves twirl in the cool fall air on their way down to the ground.
Well, Mom,
Hmm?
we don't have to look at the leaves if they make you feel sad.
Oh, Jessie, that is so kind of you. But you know, it is okay to feel sad sometimes. You know, ever since your dad died, we have felt a lot of big feelings, and they are all okay.
Yeah. I remember feeling happy
Yeah?
and then kind of sad when I saw someone playing with a kite, like the one Dad and I used to fly together.
Oh, yeah, I remember that kite. It was, let's see, it was blue and yellow and red. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, you two had so much fun making it fly.
Yeah.
You know, your daddy loved us a lot.
Yeah, he sure did. Mom?
Hmm?
I know something else he loves.
Oh, what's that?
Drinking hot apple cider on a fall day like today.
Oh, you're right about that, Jessie. You know, that would be a special treat. Why don't we go have some right now, huh?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I like that a lot.
Yeah, let's go. Come on, honey.
Okay.
I can't help but getting teared up when I watch that. I'm really proud of this work, and I just want to also just take time to thank some of the families that were involved and really offered their experiences that really did get infused in some of these works, in these resources. Dr. Summers, do you have any responses to that video in particular? I know it kind of showed, modeled some of the things that you mentioned.
Yes, absolutely, Tara. She did a wonderful job of modeling how to express her emotions and then having the conversation with Jessie about, it's okay to feel sad, it's okay to feel glad, let's have some happy memories, and being sure to express some of those. So it's an excellent example of how to do this work. And it's so important for caregivers to do that, as we've said, to really share their own experience and their own feelings related to the loss, and to, not to put that burden on the children. That's not what they're doing, but they're sharing that emotion and modeling how best to deal with it.
Right. And that leads us into our sort of final grouping of resources. And this really is about modeling healthy grieving. Do you have anything you want to add on this topic as we dive into our last set of resources?
Yeah, I think in addition to modeling how to talk about feelings in the way we've been discussing it, it's also important to model healthy grieving. And what that means is being aware of your own needs, both physically, and emotionally. So getting good sleep, eating food that is nourishing and helps you feel better, taking time for yourself when you need it, making sure that you have that space as an adult to do that, and talking to your children about those things. I'm trying to get lots of sleep because it helps me deal better with my emotions. I'm eating foods that are healthy for my body because they help me feel better and help me be in a better mood. I need this time that I'm going to go do this thing and leave you with grandma because I need some time to process everything that's going on. So talking with them also about the modeling that you're doing, and making sure that you're accepting help from others and that you're thinking about your social networks and who are the folks who you can rely on, identifying them and engaging with them to help you through your own big feelings. And again, sharing that you're doing that with your children and helping them to do that too, helping them to connect to their friends or, social circles that where they find joy and where they can have fun. So there's just a whole range of the ways that you can model healthy grieving that also will help you through your grieving yourself.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, I do want to share just this last round of resources. I've mentioned already the caregiver, sorry, it's not a caregiver, it's a provider guide. So really for educators, early childhood providers. especially this Growing as We Grieve guide. It offers, again, those milestones, sort of ages and stages breakdown of what grief might look like and what it might look like in a classroom setting as well. And some activities that providers could do to not only help the grieving child, but also just really lay a foundation of empathy in the classroom. We want to make sure that everyone is feeling seen and supported and cared for in the classroom, whether they're going through grief or not. But we also know that grieving children are very common, and sometimes caregivers, providers, especially classroom educators, might not know exactly how to handle that. And as you pointed out, it's okay if they don't know exactly how, but this guide really gives them some more context about what a child might be experiencing so that they can respond in a more effective way. We also have a new webinar coming out with Shenoa Croshu Patterson, who is a Blackfeet tribal member. We wanted to, in these resources, also highlight just how cultural differences can affect the way we process grief or understand grief and death. And so I got to chat with her about what her experiences have been as a counselor in the Native American community, and what some of those cultural traditions and understandings can do to help families grieve and process what they're going through, and to really use those cultural traditions and understandings as strengths that families can really tap into their faith or their community, as you just mentioned, as sources of strength and healing. So that's a really interesting conversation, and appreciate her spending time talking about that. And then the last thing I want to highlight is probably the star, especially of this most recent launch tomorrow, I guess, which is a digital interactive specifically for caregivers. So this is a grown-up facing resource. It's I'm especially proud of it and the team who has worked on it, because it's innovative for Sesame. It's a different format, different type of resource, and it also just encompasses both what families are experiencing, but also that experts have shared with us. So I'm going to go ahead and play just a video recording of what this interactive looks like as I talk you through what it includes. So it's a digital interactive, which you can use it on your phone or on your computer. And it is also available in Spanish. I should mention that all of these resources are available in Spanish as well. So you scroll through, and it's got messages that are affirming you. They're kind of preparing you to spend time thinking about what's happened to you, thinking about the changes, thinking about your own grief, and reassuring you as a caregiver that you're not the only one grieving, that there are families who are going through this that want to share what they've learned with you. And then so basically, this is a tool that's filled with stories from real families who have lost a loved one, and experts who are in the field sharing their tips and strategies with you as a caregiver, as a person who's grieving, to put in your own tool belt. We've formatted it as seasons of grief. We've sort of talked about this cyclical understanding of grief, that it comes and goes. And this is designed so that a person can be scrolling through and they can dip into what's resonating with them at the time. So if they're having problem understanding what even is grief, how do I talk about grief with my child, they might go into this first section where it's really about processing and talking about death and grief with children. They can read an article that expands or contracts if they're not wanting to read and they just want to watch a video or something like that. They can choose not to do that. And then we've got these real families and experts who are telling their stories and just sharing what's worked for them. And these videos pop out. They're 2-ish minutes. We tried to keep them around 2 minutes. I will say that this is a really deep content experience. It's very beautiful, and it's raw for some of these families and some of the children who also shared their experience with us. So it's a real meaningful experience to encounter these families. And then at the end of each of the sections, each of the seasons, there's a guided sort of reflection moment. So this one is a guided breathing exercise, which our expert Andy had there's a video above that talks about how to breathe in the good things and breathe out the anxiety, breathe out the stress, right? Breathe in what you can hope for, breathe out what you've lost, things like that. So there's sort of these guided activities that vary throughout each season. I really encourage you, if you are working with families, I think this would be an amazing tool to sort of break down over a series of weeks. There's a lot of rich content in there. There's a lot of strategies that families could really put into practice. And I think they would benefit from having a guide. So if you are working with families, I encourage you to check this out, take your time with it, and think about the families that you're serving, and pick out maybe a video or a section that is kind of where they are in their grief journey, and share it with them, and kind of check in on some of these exercises that the families and experts offer. I'm really, really thrilled with this piece of content, especially, and I think everything else is also just really meaningful. And you can find all of these at sesame.org/grief. And Dr. Summers, I wanted to give you the last word on any key takeaways for our group today.
I think that's a lovely and beautiful resource that you just shared, Tara. And I think it's adaptable for folks who are working with families with children of all ages, right? It's easy to think about how it fits the preschool age, but also you can think about how those activities can be adapted for older children, even up through the teenage years. So I think it's got a lot of value there. And I think my key takeaway that I would want to share with folks today is the idea of helping the parents and caregivers and the children themselves, understand that grieving is a process that takes time, and that you don't always have to have all the right answers, but keep talking, keep playing, keep engaging in ways that help you express your feelings so that you come to manage them, and you're able to integrate that feeling of loss into your life in a way that you can move forward productively.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I think this is the end of our slides, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I know we probably have some questions, and I'm happy to help answer those.
We have quite a few, it looks like. Some people who really love the Sesame Street song, as I do. It was fun to have that at the start. There's a number of questions around what do you do when playing with your child doesn't help, or it doesn't seem to be making a difference, or I think everyone knows their own child fairly well, or if it's a child that is in your classroom, or that you're a psychologist working with, you could talk with a family about the typical behavior prior to the loss and what's been happening since then, and get a sense of, is it going to extremes? Is it disrupting their daily lives? Is it debilitating to their ability to function? And if so, that's when you really need to talk with a psychologist or another mental health professional about ways of coping. And has this become something that might need a different type of treatment? Has it triggered into a different area? But having that faith that you, as a caregiver of the child, or someone working with caregivers, can really make that judgment based on an individual child by child basis. We can't say, oh, at this point it's been too long to grieve, or the grief is too extreme, or anything like that. You have to really take it as they come. I don't know if you see any particular questions that you want to address, Tara.
I did see one. This person asked, would love to hear how to tailor recommendations to parents who are also grieving. I just wanted to comment on that, and I know you probably have some more, but that came up a lot, especially in that interactive piece. We heard that a lot from the families, because they, right, the mom, the dad, they became only parents, and not just single parents, but only parents. And they offer some, I mean, it's hard. I can't imagine it, honestly, to be able to process your own grief and your own feelings while also taking on all of those new responsibilities, managing all those changes. And I feel like in the resources, we do a pretty good job of at least showing how other families have done it. And I think that, I don't know if you agree that every family is going to be different, and every parent's going to be different in how they manage that emotional load and just the practicalities of it. But do you have any thoughts there on how parents can balance both?
Yeah, the one thing I would add, Tara, is they have to give themselves space and grace, right? You have to acknowledge that you're going to have your own feelings and experiences, and again, don't hide those from your children, but give yourself space to experience them and some grace to know that you can't be all things. Even now, if you have that responsibility that you feel to take the place of, or do things the way the other parent did, or make sure all the things the other parent did are getting done too, you're still one person. You do what you can and you let the rest go, right? You think about what's most important to you and your family, and how do you focus on those things. And you don't have to braid hair the way mom did, or cook the pancakes the way dad did, or anything like that. You have your own way, and your family, is different now, and has to find its new way. And so to give yourself some space and grace to really deal with that, and not put so much pressure on yourself to try to make it all better for your children, right? Your family's going to grow in different ways together through this process.
That's right. I love that. We heard that from a couple of families, like our family is not the same as it was, but it's still good, and we have these strengths to move forward with.
Absolutely.
There are a couple of questions about the different types of sort of nuanced facets of grief, such as death by suicide or drug overdose. One of the families that we interviewed for the interactive, the death was from a drug overdose. So you do feel some of that compounding grief in their stories as well. But I do want to point you all to sesameworkshop.org. We do have more resources specifically around trauma. And we also, someone else asked about community violence, and we have resources geared toward community violence, which is a nuanced type of grief, right? It's a more of a collective grief, and there could be different triggers than the personal loss, right? A community loss or the loss of safety. So we do have resources around that topic as well. And on our military families website, we do have a new documentary, short documentary around helping families after death by suicide. So those might be helpful to you as well.
Yeah, I would also point to a website that's been put together by a number of divisions at APA that are focused on child and family issues. It's infoaboutkids.org. And they have a lovely section on grief and loss that points to these Sesame resources, as well as a number of other resources that really focus on trauma when it's experienced, and including community trauma in the way you were just talking about, Tara. I think that's another great resource for folks. There was another question that I saw that I wanted to address, because I saw it repeatedly in both the chat and the question and answers. This idea about what do you do when there are cultural differences for families who are grieving, or for children who are grieving. And I think it goes back to that idea of each individual is going to grieve differently, and you really need to think about the person or the family that's grieving. And that includes considering their culture and the things that might be strengths for them, and might be traditions for them that will help them move through this space most successfully. So all kinds of things like rituals and traditions, and the way they might celebrate holidays or celebrate memories, reaching out to leaders in their own community that might be religious or spiritual, or other types of leaders that offer comfort, participating in sort of activities that engage the culture. And if you're working with a family who is has different cultural values or different cultural experiences that you yourself don't understand, then you can talk with them about that and help them to think through these resources for themselves, or try to find someone who also understands those cultural approaches and may be able to work with them. So really approaching it with cultural humility, and the idea that what you may know for that works for one group or one family may not work for other families, and to think about those individual differences and in how you approach them and work with them.
Okay. There are several other questions. I think our team is also trying to consolidate them, and I don't know if we're going to send out an email afterwards with some of the answers. But are any others sticking out to you that you want to talk about right now?
There's a question about how important is healing for growing children. And I think that this is the question of, like, if you lose and I apologize if I'm misinterpreting, but there are several questions in there that are along the lines of, if a child has a loss early in life, does that negatively impact them for life? What does it mean, and how do you help them through that? And of course, there are all kinds of contextual circumstances in life that impact us and shape us, and the whole nature versus nurture debate. There's definitely what's in our environment that makes a difference for us. But children are amazingly resilient and consistent, strong, or consistent, warm caregiving is the key source of resilience. All the research shows that that's the key source of resilience for children. So just knowing that, but providing them with the resource of a warm, consistent caregiver, helping to establish those routines, helping them to do the things we talked about today, to talk about their big feelings, modeling ways of dealing with the grief, and helping them to situate that and integrate that into their life experience as part of what they have and who they are and how they move forward, can lead to very happy, healthy, positive outcomes for individuals. And recognizing when they may be struggling, as we said, when it may be something that is disruptive to their routines or particularly debilitating, and then seeking the help that they may need to help them process and move forward. The grief is going to be a part of their lives, of the children's lives as they grow up, but they can learn how to situate it in a way that it can be a source of memory and love and strength for them, as opposed to something that holds them back. So I hope I interpreted that question correctly, and that's a helpful kind of way to think about it and frame it.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to end on, is just that for families who have lost someone in their life, it can be so challenging, but it can also, and we saw this in the families that contributed their time and their stories, that even the children, I mean, they're thriving. I mean, they have their troubles, they have the things that they're still confused about, that they miss. One of the girls was thinking about college, like, what college do I go to? What would my dad have wanted? Or how do I tie a tie? There was one story about the young boy, he had to learn how to tie his tie from an uncle or a close friend. And it's hard to think about, but there's also just the opportunity to embrace a child's circle of care, to form new family, as we call them, right? Friends and family, to form those new circles. And I think there's always hope for these children and families.
Absolutely.
Hi, everyone. We are at time. So I just wanted to say thank you to both of our amazing presenters. You all knocked it out of the park. To everybody who attended, a huge thank you for both of our teams. Please look out for a follow-up email listing links to the resources that so many of you have asked for, and of course, a link to the recording. Thank you, and we hope to see you at another webinar soon.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.